Happening right now, crude oil futures have jumped 8% to $104.40 per barrel as the U.S. Navy announces a blockade of Iran's ports. So who really got the upper hand out of this 21-hour negotiation period? As Richard Haass, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, argues, quote, negotiations always reflect realities on the ground, so U.S. efforts to impose peace terms on Iran were destined to fail. That said, the first round of talks always have a throat-clearing quality, so chances of a breakthrough were negligible. The diplomatic dance is just beginning. Joining us now is somebody who knows that diplomatic dance very well, Robert Malley, former special envoy for Iran and the lead negotiator on the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. He's also the co-author of the book Tomorrow is Yesterday, Life, Death, and the Pursuit of Peace in Palestine, Israel and Palestine. Robert, great to have you with us. So let me get your reading of these negotiations. First of all, do you share Richard Haass's optimism there? And more importantly, how do you read what has come out of these 21 hours where both sides are accusing the other of maximalist positions and walking away?
First, Ayman, it's great to be back. Listen, maybe Richard Haass is right, and that does happen in negotiations, that the first round is both sides just stated their maximalist positions. I'd have more confidence in that if it weren't for everything we've heard from the president since then, which is he said not just that he wants Vice President Vance to achieve the majority of what he asked for, but he said not just 95%, not 98%, but 100% of what he asked for. And then we're getting reports, they may be misleading, of what those red lines are, and you just went through them. If that's the red line, if it's that Iran has to give up all enrichment, that has to destroy all of its enrichment capacity, if it has to turn over all of its enriched uranium and stop funding its proxies, and who knows what else, then I would have said Vice President Vance could have spared himself the trip, because the answer was going to be no then, and it's going to be no tomorrow, even if Iran suffers more as a result of the blockade.
How did you read the sort of entrance, the teams that both sides sent here? So you have J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner leading on one side. And then it appeared that the Iranians arrived with a very deep bench. At the outset of these talks, did you have a sense that they were going to fail within 21 hours? Or did you think that, at least on the Iranian side, just given the number of people, the experts it appeared they brought into the room, that they thought there was something very serious on the table?
Well, yeah, I think that the Iranians did come in force. I think I would want to give some credit to the U.S. side. Having Vice President Vance there, I think, was also a sign of seriousness. But I don't think it was either who was at the table or how long they spoke. It really comes down to this. Was the U.S. position truly reflecting their view that the U.S. had so much leverage that ultimately the Iranians would have to accept what they had rejected prior to the war? And if that was the mentality coming in, it doesn't matter who the negotiator was, it was not going to succeed. And I didn't know that coming in. Knowing that now, or at least soon, based on what we're reading, if that was the case, then as I say, the negotiations were dead on arrival. And the question is now whether both sides go back and they come back with more flexibility. And again, I don't know what the Iranian position was, but based on what we're seeing from the U.S. position, they're going to need to give more than they've given so far.
Both sides, as you pointed out, seem to think that they have the upper hand on some level. So you have the U.S. with the strongest, most powerful military in the world, and then you have Iran that does control this critical choke point. Who do you think actually has more leverage right now?
I mean, I'm not sure how much it matters. What matters is who thinks they have more leverage. And I think for the basic misunderstanding of the Trump administration, the president himself, he seems to believe that if you hit somebody hard enough, they'll say yes, and if they don't say yes, you need to hit them harder, and then they'll capitulate. That's what he seems to believe domestically and in international relations. It certainly is not going to work in this case because the Iranians believe that they have real leverage. In fact, they think that right now they could live with the absence of a deal more comfortably than the U.S. can because, yes, they're going to be hit more, but they believe that every hit has diminishing marginal returns. I mean, yes, how many more factories can you hit? How many more oil facilities can you hit? Whereas they think that every day that goes by where the Strait of Hormuz is closed, it's increasing marginal pain for the U.S. because the inflation rate goes up, because the Republican Party's fortunes go down, because the market risks crashing. So from their perspective, they think, you don't have a deal? We go back to where we were before. We could sustain it more than you can. And that's why the negotiating tactic of the U.S. side has not succeeded.
To that point, the Speaker of the Parliament in Iran posted a mocking message on X just now, or earlier this evening, saying, "Enjoy the current pump figures with the so-called blockade. Soon you'll be nostalgic for $4 to $5 gas." And the post includes a map of gas stations around the White House with gas prices. Do you think that that is the kind of thing that could potentially break through? I mean, certainly Republican lawmakers here in the United States are fearful of the consequences of high gas prices and creeping inflation. But it's a little bit unclear to me whether the White House itself has really internalized that political risk.
So my guess, and again, I don't know, I don't speak to the people in the White House, is that many of the political advisors in the White House get it. They don't want to see a debacle in the midterm elections. I think the vice president himself probably gets it because this can't be good for his political future. I think the one man who really counts either doesn't get it or doesn't care. President Trump, he's not on the ballot. He may think the two things he wants to do is to go down in history because of, his self-importance, his narcissism, and he wants to go down in history as the person who made Iran bend, or the Islamic Republic bend its knee. And he also has financial interests. And I know you've been reporting about how some of the dealings that are taking place are quite shady. So, family fortune plus his own name in the history books may be motivating him more than the price of oil, the price of gas, or the prospects that the Republican Party could really suffer a very serious defeat in the midterms.
Robert, what do you think this will do if the U.S. does blockade the strait that Iran has already blockaded, or there are additional forms of escalation, or the war ends up proceeding in some way in the coming days? What do you think all this will do to other relations? I have to imagine, China will be quite upset if the U.S. Does actually start to engage with ships that try to go through the strait. Pakistan, which has been negotiating, hosted these talks. They have a very tight relationship with China. It seems like this all could get quite messy for people who were otherwise either staying a bit on the sidelines or seem to be trying to help reach a resolution here.
Yeah, so first I really want to foot stomp a point that was made earlier, the absurdity of the situation where the U.S. is now blockading a strait because negotiations that were designed to open them fail, and a strait that was open before the war even began. So it really is compounding absurdity upon absurdity, and I really wonder how historians are going to make sense of this period of our life. But to your point, yes, I think, and this is why we don't know enough now, how is this blockade going to be imposed? What happens if a Chinese vessel in particular tries to cross through and reach an Iranian port? Are they going to be stopped? So there are many questions now. I think the president it's a roll of the dice. It's his way of proceeding. He's convinced that by scaring everyone, people are going to have to come to him and surrender. And I think we're about to find out, A, whether other countries are prepared to acquiesce in this new regime, and B, if they're not, what the U.S. Navy is going to do in response.
Robert Malley, thanks so much for your time tonight.